think it's recording now. Welcome to CTL, Council Table of Leaders in September of 2024. I'm still amazed we're this far into the year. It just seems like it really is going super fast. Today, we're going to talk a little bit in the area of leadership, but also in the area of leadership as it relates to politics, business, and you. And what I mean by that is that the concept of leadership to me in the Christian kingdom is like Jesus did. He says, I only do what I hear, or I only do what I see the Father doing. I only say what I hear the Father saying. Aamon Ross, who we have today, is a champion of that, at least in the narrow exposure I've had to his life. And I really admire that. And that's why I like lifting that up among us here at the council table, because I think that is key. And if Jesus did it well, we need to be like that. You have your own Bible characters that probably mirror that same attitude. And so it doesn't matter which sphere of influence you're going into. Some people call it the seven mountains, as you know, that Johnny Enlow did. Johnny's a good friend of mine. And whatever sphere you're going into, if you can hear God well, like Jesus did, and like many of the Bible characters did, at least what we're exposed to, they succeeded in God's eyes. That's the key here. And so Aamon's going to bring today, and I'm excited to hear about what he's doing, because politics is an area that many of us don't want to gravitate towards. A lot of us are cautioned not to go there. And so I can't wait to hear some of the things that he's learned as he's gone into this, because God has led him into it. And Aamon, when Aamon and I talked the other day, and with just a little background of Aamon, is that he's married. He has 3 great children. They're now getting into their teenage years, but he's having the time of his life with them. And as I mentioned to him, I really believe that particularly for fathers, if you love your family well, if you get engaged in that, you'll get an MBA in business, because you're going to learn so many dynamics. And particularly for a man, if he loves his wife well, particularly, he'll get a PhD. And so I'm excited for Aamon, because he's in that position. He's in that place of leadership. He is coming alongside many people, thousands, according to his thing, to lead people into politics and help govern them, help to bring them strategy. And he's got a curriculum that's based on kingdom ideas. So people, when they launch into politics, they have that in their heart and their mind, which is key, getting the heart and mind in alignment with God. So Aamon, come and bring us what the Lord has been showing you and what he's brought wisdom to you, so that and exposed to us too at the, if you can put in the chat or whatever, how we can help you achieve the big magnificent goal that you've got of raising up 100,000 people to go into politics at various levels, but particularly on the local level. And thanks for being here today.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Bill. Do you guys hear that noise, that feedback? I don't know if it's just me. Okay.
There you go. I did. It was one guy that thank you for that.
Perfect. Okay. Very good. Well, so thank you all. Appreciate it. So I thought what I would do is just share a little bit about my story and what the way that I have journeyed in my relationship with the Lord. It has not been easy, but it's been pretty wild and a lot of fun. So back in 2016, I was in the business world for 20 years, had an amazing life, lived in Tulsa, Oklahoma. It was very fun, profitable, easy. And a friend of mine came over and said, hey, you want to go on a half business, half mission trip to China with me? And I said, sure. So we went to China, and it was incredible. Met with business leaders in a couple of different cities over there who were believers. And during the process, we took a day to go do some sightseeing. And so we're walking along the Great Wall of China. And while I'm up there, I'm just quietly praying to myself, walking along, and I had an experience, and it was literally like something you read out of the Bible, like a thunder and lightning bolt moment. and I heard the audible voice of God. And he said, Aamon, you think too small. You don't think generationally. And it scared me to death. I was instantly in tears. I was just the amount of power I felt in the words. It just scared me. And man, it was such an overwhelming moment. And so I got back to the States and I'm having coffee with one of my best friends, and I told him about that experience, and he said, well, what do you think it means? And I said, I've been praying about it for the last week. And I feel like God wants you and me to put our heads together and put godly leaders in positions of authority at the state and national level. And he's sitting there buttering his bagel and just stops and puts down his food. And he's staring at me. And I said, well, you all right? What's going on? And he said, do not tell anybody this, but I think God's called me to run for governor. Be my campaign manager. And I said, Kevin, that's the dumbest idea I've ever heard. I don't like politics. I don't really care about politics. I've never done anything but vote. He said, me neither. So fast forward a few months, I have been praying about it and praying about it. The company I was with got acquired, and they came to me and said, please don't leave. You can do whatever you want. So I told them what I wanted. They came back to me and on a Friday and said, hey, here, the offer is in your inbox. Read it over the weekend, sign it, and get it back to us. And so that weekend, I was on my knees praying, and on Monday I had to call them and say, hey, I'm going to turn this down and go run my friend's campaign for governor, which was like, they were just floored. They're like, okay, this is the part you tell us you're messing with us. And I'm like, no, I'm really sorry. I know that you guys went to a lot of work to do this, but this is what I feel like I need to do. And the president said, well, don't apologize to me. And I'm like, well, what do you mean? He said, I don't want to have to explain to God why I gave you a hard time for going to do something that you felt like he called you to do. And I didn't even know if this guy's a believer or what. So anyway, it really caught me off guard. So the very next day I started with my friend Kevin Stitt, and it was interesting. It was a 10-person primary, and so the lieutenant governor was in there, the mayor, a lot of business leaders, and it was on day one we sat down and wrote out 150 vocabulary flashcards with like 5th grade civics terminology. That's how dumb we were. Okay. We literally, like, what is a bill? What is a state representative? We knew nothing. I mean, it was so bad. So we would go from meeting to meeting to meeting, and we would quiz each other on, these 150 vocabulary flashcards. And you know what? It's really, I think, a great visual for anything in life. And so the primary was about 18 months, and we ended up making it to the top 2. I have the gift of hiring people much smarter than me. And so I did about 150 interviews nationwide for my team. I had a staff of about 40, had 300 volunteers. We made it to the top 2. We ended up winning the runoff, and we won the general, and he's the governor of Oklahoma. And that was an absolutely incredible experience. At the end of it, he asked me to be the chief strategy officer for Oklahoma. And at first I said yes, and then came back to him a few weeks later and just said, Kevin, I just worked 80 hours a week for the last 2 years, and I need to take some time off and spend it with my family. So I did a sabbatical, and during that time, it was really interesting. I really did. I didn't even know where Redding, California was. We were living in Tulsa, and I was listening to a lot of different podcasts, like Art mentioned, and it happened to be a lot of Bill Johnson and Chris Valentin. And I didn't really even know, I didn't know Bethel really or anything like that. I know a lot of pastors, but I don't know where they preach or what goes on. So. Or where they're located. And so anyway, I get a call from some guy named Sean Foyt. And it's this he calls me, he says, "Hey, my name's Sean. I'm running for Congress in California. I'd love to come to Tulsa and meet with you." I'm like, "Okay." And I didn't even know who he was. I didn't know that I knew a lot of his songs, his praise and worship songs. I learned that later on. And so we meet, and we talk for about 2.5, 3 hours. And at the end, he said, "You're the guy I need to come run my campaign." And he had already been running his campaign for Congress for about 4 or 5 months. And I said, "Sean," I said, "let's just stop right here." I said, I don't know you. I couldn't care less about your campaign. I said, "How did you even get my phone number?" And he said, "Well, you met a friend of mine in Destin, Florida, in a hot tub at a resort you were staying at during your campaign. And he's from Oklahoma. And he said that you guys, accomplished the impossible. And that's what we're trying to do here." And I said, "Well, if you had called me on any other day of the year, I would have zero interest in hearing what you have to say. But you happened to call me on November 6th. And he's like, "Well, what was November 6th?" And I said, "Well, you've been running your campaign since the end of August or middle of August. And the fact that you called me on November 6th is the 1-day anniversary of our general election win." And I said, "I kind of know how God speaks to me. And so I'm open to hearing a little more of what you have to say." And I'm like, where do you even live?" And so he's like, "Redding, California." So I pull up a map and looked at California to find out where Redding was. And he goes, "What would be the next step?" I'm like, "Well, I guess bring me out there just to look around." So I came out here, and the next thing I know, I'm sitting on Bill Johnson's back porch and we're having a conversation. And I had just spent a sabbatical, listening to this guy. And it was so wild to that Bill and Chris happened to be the two people that I was listening to all the time. So Miles Monroe, Bill Johnson, and Chris Valentin were the three people I was listening to. And so ended up, we put a fleece out, and basically all the impossible things happened in a week, which I was positive they weren't going to and wouldn't be able to. And that's kind of why we put them out there. But they happened, and we ended up moving to Redding, California, and knowing full well that his campaign was going to lose because it was totally set up wrong. They did everything you could possibly do wrong. They had already done wrong. So moved out here. That ended. COVID hit, and then the next week our house in Tulsa sold. So we're kind of stranded in Redding, and Lindsay, I know you can relate to this, but California definitely responded differently to COVID than most states did. So a lot of things were locked down. It was just not really a fun place to be. And so one morning, it was a Sunday morning in June of 2020. And the governor of California had just come out and said, you can't sing in church because that'll spread COVID. And so I was just praying, and I said, "Lord, this is total BS." And that's literally what my prayer was. And I said, I do not accept that. What do you want me to do? And I heard it clear as day. Praise and worship on the Golden Gate Bridge. So I called up Sean, who's a praise and worship guy, and I said, "Hey, I was praying. This is what the Lord said." He said, "Let's do it on Thursday." So we had 300 people from all kinds of different churches meet on the Golden Gate Bridge in the middle of June and did 3 hours of praise and worship. And it was unbelievable. It was so cool. And, the cops showed up, and I was like, "Oh my gosh, I'm going to get arrested for sure." The head officer came up to me and said, "Who's in charge here?" And I'm like, "Well, no one's really in charge. We're just all doing this together. But if you need to speak to anybody about it, I guess it's me." And I said, "How can I help you?" And he said, "You can't help me." And I was like, "Okay, like, what do you want?" Or I said, "Well, so what do you need?" He goes, "We're here to help you." And I was like, "Excuse me?" And he said, "We love what you're doing, and we're going to block off this entire lane of the Golden Gate Bridge so Antifa, can't throw stuff at you or attack you guys." And so they brought like 20 vehicles out there and blocked off the entire lane of the Golden Gate Bridge. And that ended up being the first Let Us Worship event that is still going on today. So 4 years later, they've been all over the world, all 50 state capitals doing Let Us Worship events. And so, it's funny. God just has an amazing sense of humor if you're willing to say yes and steward whatever that yes is. And so I don't have a lot of time left, but I did want to tell you about something that I really feel like God's been sharing with me. And, I have the opportunity to speak all over the country at different events and to groups of pastors and believers. And, during my sabbatical, or during COVID, actually right at the beginning in 2020, we filmed a program called Kingdom in Politics. And our mission is to raise up 100,000 believers to run for office in 10 years. And it's basically all the best practices, pitfalls to avoid, everything you could imagine from over 150 political consultants nationwide. And one of the things that I see as I go across the country is that believers they use the word calling as a way to not get involved in things. And so I over and over and I'm not called to that. I'm not called to that. And the irony is, like, I'm not called to politics. It's so fascinating. But as I prayed and I was talking to the Lord about it, he said, it's just an assignment. And so I really think it's important that we that we understand who we are and who we were designed to be. That's really walking that out is your calling. What your calling is who you were walking out who you were designed to be. Your assignment is the places that you execute on that calling. And so I still really don't even care. The irony is I don't even still care about politics, right? But I can't, I can still feel it as it was yesterday. Those words resonated in my heart, that I don't think generationally. And my goal now is to make a kingdom generational impact in anything I do. And so we've raised up thousands of believers from school board to governor to senator all over the country to run for office. And, I think that the way that we go about it is very different. We call it the Matthew 10:16 principle. And this is something we try to incorporate in everything we do. It's the wise as a serpent, gentle as a dove, right? Now, we've all heard the gentle as a dove sermon. And when I go speak, I do the wise as a serpent part, right? You never hear a pastor talk about being wise as a serpent, right? And yet that's the 50% of that command. And so one of the things that we do is we really teach, and I've worked with, like I said, so many candidates in all races, and they all want to put Bible verses on their website and do this and that. And I tell them, take it all off, because the reality is, that you're just virtue signaling there. And the truth is we need believers that are wise as a serpent, that are willing to fly behind the radar. And it's not disingenuous, because if you think about it from the other perspective, right? There's so many people in public office out there who are atheists, for instance, right? But you never see on their website, I'm the most atheist of atheists, right? But they go in, they run their campaign, they do it in a really wise way, and then they are able to implement their worldview into that office. And we need believers doing the same thing. We need believers, not out there like giving sermons on the campaign trail. We need believers, actually bringing really wise kingdom ideas to public office that they can implement, but they're doing it all from a biblical worldview. Proverbs 25:26 says, like a muddied spring or a polluted well are the righteous who give way to the wicked. And I think that there's that verse in the Bible about, when the days are evil and they will call evil good and good evil. We're in those days. It's very clear. And I think that right now, that more than ever, it's important that the righteous stand up, and that we are pushing back and we are fighting, because, the battle's been won, right? And so we have to start operating from a position of that victory instead of oh, the world's on fire, um, we're losing. It's horrible. Jack Hayford once said, it's hard to sell heaven by the half acre if you're telling them it's going to hell in a handbasket. And I think that, it's so important for us to approach the world of government, the world politics, as something that God really cares about, and we need to steward that well. Even in the Old Testament, all but 3 books are written to or from someone who was in government, and the Bible's full of it. And so if there's only one message that you all remember, it's the calling versus assignment. You can make a difference in so many different areas of life without being, quote, called to it. Any questions? I don't have a whole lot of time left with you today, but I just wanted to share a little bit about that. So we, like for instance, I'll be speaking in 2 weeks in DC at the Family Research Council's annual Pray, Vote, Stand Summit. It's amazing. There will be thousands of believers from all over the place coming to grow and learn. We do a lot of training for people who run for office. We even train people abroad. I told you earlier, I taught 2 semesters at the Bethel School of Ministry. One of the most interesting things about that experience to me was, I would say 80% of the people that took my class were from other countries, because you don't understand it when you grow up and you're from the States, and if you haven't traveled a lot abroad, how much people are mind blown at the way that America has been able to be and stay free for 250 years. They can't wrap their mind around it, and they know better than we do that it was founded in biblical values. It's pretty bad, actually, the way that most foreigners have a better understanding of the fundamentals and foundation of the United States government than the people that actually live here. But anyway, I thought I'd open up for questions for a couple minutes, and then I gotta go.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Your friend Kevin, out of the blue, approached you. You guys did the whole thing, but then when the guy Sean approached you, you said you knew that was going to fail because they hadn't situated it well. And I just wanted to talk through.
That's a great question.
Where the divine and preparation meet sometimes when God is calling us to something, because Jennifer and I earlier today were talking about Nehemiah, who was a cupbearer. How in the world did he think, well, send me to build up a city that was torn down? You're a cupbearer. So then your friend had this vision, you had it, he was successful, he's now governor. But then this other guy comes to you and he talks, but you were right away, you said you knew that was not going to work, and it didn't, apparently. So just wanted to talk that through.
Yeah. So that's a great question. I love it. And, look, the truth is, when you think about a cupbearer, right, that person is super cupbearer to a king. You are super smart. You're probably intelligent. You know when to talk, when not to talk. You can probably dialogue on world events. You've listened to the king and all of the leaders in meetings all the time. You paid attention. You're probably well read. The people, I think, really, when you think about Nehemiah, that you talked about preparation. That's what he had been doing for the last however many years prior to that moment, right? And I think that something that Bill said earlier about being in the process of that childlikeness, of just continuing to learn, continuing to grow, continuing to steward. And then it's funny because in God's economy, one day everything can change, right? And so being prepared for that moment of opportunity is so important. And for me, when Kevin and I, weren't necessarily well prepared for anything except to lead. I'd led teams. I'd learned how to make a lot of mistakes, and nothing is more humbling than leading a team in a space that you know nothing about, and everyone on your team knows a whole much more about than you do, right? And so that was that was the thing I knew I had to do, the one thing that I could do well, and that's hire really amazing people, set a vision, and then hold them accountable. And outside of that, you know, I had to trust the people around me to make good decisions.
So what do you think about the one Sean, who wanted you to do his campaign? And it, like, what do you think about that? Why do you think that was not successful?
They just made a ton of strategic blunders. The people that he had leading his campaign were the same ones that ran Ben Carsell's presidential campaign. And so, you know, when I came in, I said the first thing I said was, why do we have a picture of, you know, Sean playing guitar to a group of kids in another country that can't vote in a primary? You know, that's the first thing you see on the front page of the website. And then in the voter guide, they put missionary. And I said, well, why'd you do that? And they said, well, it's code for Christian. And I said, do you have some data that says that people want their next congressman to be a Christian? You know, because you could have just said businessman. You know, and look, I think Sean's campaign had very little to do with politics. You know, it brought me out here and gave me a great global network of people. And it gave Sean, you know, Let Us Worship, which has been a 4-year platform that he is, you know, and I went to 7 or 8 of those events around the nation. And, you know, there's thousands of people that show up to every one of those. And there's hundreds and hundreds giving their lives to the Lord. And so it's made a massive difference, both in the States and abroad.
So I would wrap up with saying this, just with what you said. We have to see what success is according to the Lord then.
That's right.
Because he may not have been successful in whatever he contacted you for, but from that, the Lord used it to help you both find success in something else.
That's right. You know, it's really funny. Just because you're walking out an assignment doesn't mean it's going to be successful in the way that you thought it was. You know, success is defined, you know, on an eternal timeline, not on what we think it might look like. So, all right, Bill, I got to roll pretty quick here.
Do you have time for one more question?
Yeah.
So would you say that, okay, Sean's run for office was unsuccessful? Did some of those things he was doing, did they work as far as the success with the Let Us Worship?
I don't understand the question.
Well, evidently he did a lot of things wrong as far as the politics were concerned. I'm wondering if some of those things played over into being the right way to go with the worship experience. It's been successful for 4 years.
You know, I think that what it did is, I think for him, it severed some you know, some things that were, you know, he had to leave his the people that he worked with. He had to leave that to go run for office, which ended up freeing him up to go do this.
Okay. Yeah.
So I think that for him, that was probably a really big part of it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, thanks
All
for
right.
being here today.
Yeah, it was good. And we'll continue on a little bit on the discussion, but we'll give an adios to Mr.
Hey, great
Aamon.
meeting you all. Thank you, guys.
Aamon, thanks so much. I'll be in touch.
All right. Sounds good. God bless.
Take care. I would like to keep this conversation going if people want to, because to me, it's not about politics per se. As I told Aamon before he got on, one of the primary things I think it's very applicable to us, is I am on the council table of leaders here, is how do we lead well in the spheres of influence? So it could be in politics, business, you know, music industry, you know, entertainment, sports, whatever. How do we do that? And most of the time we're doing it, if we're out beyond our sphere of family or church, it's going to be integrated with people that are not Christian that or antagonistic to Christianity. And it's, it's a free for all at that point as to how to lead well. That's why I think he was commenting on the second, was it Sean, the second politician in California, and that a lot of Christians that I've known that gone into politics, it's a dilemma as to, are you not standing up for Jesus by, in other words, you should put Jesus on your website, or, wear a cross on your shirt or something to signify that you're a Christian. I think you have to just go to God for that. But my point is that when we go out there into the marketplace, what are they looking for? They're looking for good leaders and leadership characteristics, and embedded that, hopefully you're a magnificent leader from just the qualities of a regular leader. But the exponential factor, the X factor, as some people say, in a leader as a Christian, then those are the Nehemiahs and the Davids and the Moseses or the Esthers and so forth, who have the Holy Spirit in them to guide them beyond, as I think he was using that Matthew 10 scripture where it says, be wise as a serpent. And it's that kingdom wisdom that blows people away. And then they go, where did you get that? Or how did you get that? Anyway, I just wanted to embellish that I've enjoyed listening to y'all's discussion, and particularly, Shonda, I think you've a great question, because it applies to me to anything, just like in your own life. I know a little bit about you, that you're in that place of decision making, and how does this calling versus assignment work, and what does all that mean? And I'd like to hear how y'all are unpacking that this calling versus assignment that he was saying there. Did that make sense to you?
I have a question to visit a little bit off, but Jennifer and Sean, you're both in Chicago. Now, are you actually related? Do you know each other outside of bills together? You do some things together in Chicago?
Yes.
Yes,
Okay.
we do.
What is that?
Shonda and I met about almost 5 years ago. We ended up, it was during when everything was shut down. I started attending online the church that she and her husband went to, and they had small groups. So that's how I initially got connected to them, and from there we've just done so many more things. But we still I'm a part of the ministry that she and her husband have.
Okay. Well, just seeing you here on Zoom, I may have been on before. I don't recall, because I'm not very good week to week with names. But there's a real kindred spirit with. It's really the Holy Spirit really connect you to, and really comes through right here in Zoom. So I just want you to know that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Jennifer, and I think it's worth adding, just to add to this part. We just got off of a meeting because we're in the middle of starting a nonprofit educational intervention program called the Core to Three Strands, and we're wrestling through all of this right now, which is why I asked the question. So I just wanted to put that out there.
Well, to me, this is right in the heartbeat of what God loves, is where he loves to hear what's on your heart, how you want to go about it. And so anybody got any thoughts about Shonda and Jennifer's thing, or just in the bigger picture of calling versus assignment?
Well, I wanted to respond to your calling versus assignment.
Okay.
I find a lot of people don't know what their calling is, and I don't use the word calling, I use the word purpose, because we're all here, I believe, for a purpose. And so I try to teach people how they can find out their purpose. And my purpose is to bring freedom to the bride, which is wide open to whatever Holy Spirit wants me to do, and he gives me assignments to do in that, and I'm very comfortable with that. So, and I don't run just in one lane, I run in about 6 lanes of things he's got me doing. Some people say, oh, you need to focus on one thing and nothing else, focus on one. Well, that might work for them, but that doesn't work for me at all. So it's a matter of listening to Holy Spirit, in my opinion, but starting with knowing what your purpose is here on earth. And it doesn't matter what age you learn that. And knowing your purpose doesn't mean you're going to be in your purpose right that moment. But God is leading you and teaching you in doing your purpose, and he'll know what the end result is, and you don't have to have the end result today. That's my thought on it. Good question, Bill.
Other thoughts around calling and purpose?
I really liked his definitions, actually. I thought those were interesting, and I really appreciated, just that whole Romans 8:28 thing working out, meaning like, I know Sean, I went to Bethel, my friend worked on that campaign, like I kind of know some of that, but I loved how he said, he and his family went to Reading. He heard from God, we should worship on the Golden Gate Bridge. That started that thing for Sean. And then it started this other thing for Ammon. And I'm just like, yes, that is how God works, because we've all probably done things we felt like God was calling us to do. And then it didn't really work out the way we thought. At least I have. And so that was just an encouragement. Like, God will always, when he's leading us, I don't know. I feel like we do. One time God said to me a few months ago, Lindsay, you have to stop wasting your time trying to figure out how the future is or he said, stop wasting your creative energy on trying to figure out how I'm going to do it. And I thought that was so powerful, because I'm like, that's true. Me sitting here like thinking and thinking and thinking, trying to figure out how you're going to do it in the future is a waste of my creative energy, And so that was just very encouraging to me, like one day at a time with God, do what he says. Sometimes he gives me more clarity than what he says, and leave the results up to him. It's probably gonna be better than we think anyway, But that was just encouraging to me, to be like, Sean thought, oh, I'm supposed to go in this direction. And God was like, well, you were, because it was gonna then birth this thing that you're probably gonna like better than politics anyway, So I don't know. I just thought that was really encouraging.
It's good. Just for our sake, I wrote down what I thought he said about calling. What do you feel, or how did you interpret his definition, or how are you using the definition for calling? That was for you, Lindsay. I'm sorry.
Oh, funny. Okay. So I felt just recently, I have not had clarity about what God and I were doing for many years. I mean, he's given me one step at a time for all those years, but I never really quite understood, like, what's the point? And just recently he showed me, like, well, Letting Leaven, which is the book I wrote and the curriculum I have and all this stuff, it's been like birthing a child, because it's made no money and it's been taking all my time and energy. And I'm like, why? But God told me, like, well, that's your calling. So to me, that means it was not my idea. I didn't want to do it. He kind of tricked me into it, in a sweet, Jehovah sneaky kind of way. But he totally like tricked me into it. And I don't really, like, I do have a passion for it, but it feels a little bit like a burden, if I'm honest. And, but he told me, like, that's your calling, and I don't know the answers, but I just liked his definition where he said, like, we have like a calling and a purpose. And because, sorry, I'm kind of rambling, but, but I go ahead.
I was going to say, here's what I wrote down for him. And I think you were highlighting this. Who got your calling is who God has designed you to be.
Oh, right.
And that's because for some of us who are still searching, like, what does that really mean? What do you design? So if I, like in the construction industry that I used to be in, I think of buildings and I think the design of the building, and and it becomes almost, it can become too fixed. Like, oh, my images of a building, like people used to ask me, Bill, what do you do? And I said, well, I'm a general contractor. And they said, well, what do you do? And I said, well, I build buildings. But they'd say, what do you do? and what they really wanted, their brain really wanted to know was, tell me a type of building. Like, I build Chick-fil-A's or I build hospitals. Because if I just leave it out there, and most of us are in that realm when we come to know Christ, we're going, okay, well, who do you design me to be? And he says, I designed you to be you. And you go, oh, that's great, God, but what does you mean? You know, and it takes us a while to develop that understanding, and it takes patience. But I think that the key to me in the design term, he designed us to be family. If I could put it in a softer term, and what that means is you be a good daughter or son of the Father, and in that he begins to magnify himself. So I love the idea of design, but it's like Julia saying, I use the word purpose. That makes it a little bit more practical down on the earth realm side. On my tombstone, if I die before my wife, I would like her to put on there, he was a good son. And it's a double meaning. I tried to be a good son on the earth, even though my dad was a little bit of a tough nut to love, but it trained me to be a good son, I think, in the kingdom. And so to me, that's my life purpose. But then underneath that, and I'll give you another term if you want, besides he tricked me, if you want to use it. He's tricked me twice in my lifetime, moving me from career to career. The first time is when he got me out of the large commercial. I worked for a multi-billion-dollar commercial construction company. We built like the Atlanta Stadium, and I built hospitals and hotels and stuff. And then he tricked me because I resigned from that company, and I wanted to just get into a small company here in Atlanta so that I wouldn't have to travel so much, because that was one of the problems I was resigning from the other company, was that they were making me travel more. I had more responsibility, but I didn't have any more resources and pay to get to kind of what I felt I needed to gravitate. So I said, okay, I'm just going to find a local company, and that way I can stay geographically close. But then the CFO of that company that I resigned from said, hey, you're a Christian, I'm a Christian. I've got some work that's coming up with Billy Graham and with Jerry Falwell, and I'd like you to run those. And would you be willing to do that? And I said, but I'm not going to move out of Atlanta. He says, why don't you start your own company? There's the trick. And I went, wow, this guy knows all these Christians. I know how to build. What a match. That'll work. And I can stay in Atlanta and we can do this. And 3 months later, the owner of that company, the big company that the CFO worked under, he was diagnosed with Lou Gehrig's disease. And that CFO called me and said, hey, we can't go forward with our idea because we're going to sell the company. And so I call that carrot, like a donkey. I'm the donkey and there's a carrot. And I'm following the carrot. And so the carrot was teaching me, saying, hey, go to the CFO and go with him with Billy Graham and all that stuff. And God was going, you'll get it. You'll get it later. You'll understand. And for the next 20 years, I fulfilled the purpose of being a good dad in my home, because we started homeschooling. I was able to work out of the home. I wasn't traveling. It fulfilled all that, but I felt so out of place because I thought I'm supposed to be in the big contracting mode. But now I called myself a big contractor in small shoes. So I did build stuff that was like 2 stories and retail centers and hospital or medical offices and stuff like that. And then the second time he got me in this little trickery, but I see it good because I see him as a good daddy, and I'm the donkey again. And I get a prophetic word about that Jesus was walking the beaches of the earth, and he was looking for a coin, and that coin was me. And he says, I'd like to spend you the way I want to, but I want you to have the choice of how I get spent. And so I said, okay. And so but I knew at that time that I was in a decision-making mode, and I prayed over for the next couple of months. And I said, okay, I'm going to lay Blaine Construction down, but I didn't know what I was going to do, because I felt like that's what and so I carry this in my pocket now. This is a silver coin that's etched. And he says, all your history of Bill Blaine is etched on that coin, and you are more valuable than you know. But how I get spent in the different assignments is what I heard Aamon say. So that's how I was translating for myself. My calling is to be a good son. And in that, I have some leadership abilities that I didn't know I had, that God had to trained me in over the last 14 years. Art's been my proctor for that. So anyway, I want to encourage you, if my life is an example, that I was a fish out of water when I got into the leadership stuff, because I had never been trained in it, but I was around all these other people that had. And so anyway, but I call it carrot theology, because I really am trying to not be a dumb donkey, but I want to be a donkey that Jesus can ride on like he did. So anyway, those are some thoughts that I have about calling an assignment, if that makes sense. Other thoughts?
Well, on a different thought, I thought it was neat that you don't necessarily get. I'm a Jesus guy, a Jesus follower, and I want to get Jesus into every conversation. And from what I heard Aamon say, you don't necessarily do that. People find out that Jesus in you by living in your worldview and presenting. So what we're really there to do is present truth, and then the Lord comes through in that way. So that was good. So that was a little check in what I was thinking. And of course, you know the person I work for today, Ashley, in terms of she gets stuck so many times. I say stuck in terms of say, well, this is a Christian organization. She's very quick to say, no, this isn't a Christian organization. We're just trying to bring value to the marketplace where to help everybody that's vulnerable in human trafficking or some aspect of that around the world. And so she dodges the question very quickly, but it comes out and say, well, her worldview is clearly Christian when you think about it, because it's truth coming out.
Thoughts? More questions?
I like what you said, Bill, because it's too long to ramble on about, but I mean, I feel like that's kind of what God did. Like, he kind of used my, like, desire to follow him no matter what to bring me to LA. And I thought, okay, I'm here to serve the people of this city. You know, I'm here to help them come to know Jesus, which is true. But I didn't know that I also had a desire in my heart to be inside of this creative field myself and actually perform or do these things. And so when I say trick, I mean very kind, loving Papa, you know, not in a mean way at all. I think it's almost like he's like using where you're at to bring you to what you would really love, but you don't even know what that is, you know? And I felt like that's kind of what he's done with me. And so I just feel really thankful, you know. I just love it. I mean, I love it. I mean, it's not easy, and it's like, but I have to depend on him. I get to do it with him, and it's so fun because it's something I don't have in my natural mind, really. Kind of like Aamon was saying, he didn't know anything about politics, you know. And so that's kind of like me in this world. I've learned a little bit now being here 10 years, but I mean, I kept trying to be like, can someone explain this industry to me? Because it's so different than any industry I've ever been in. But now I love it. And God said to me a while ago, he said, Linz, you love adventures. Like Hollywood is your new adventure, you know? And I'm like, okay, that sounds super fun, God. So yeah, so when I say trick, or I'm always saying like in the sweet Papa way, where he's leading us to something that we would love more than we think, but sometimes he does have to kind of shake us out of where we are in order to get us there, you know? Or that was my experience.
Amen. Julia, you got any thoughts? You good, huh? Okay. Heather, anything?
No, I've just been listening to you, but no thoughts.
Okay. Well, we'll close it out here and go to prayer. Thanks for coming today, and we will see you again in 2 weeks. You know, actually in 2 weeks, I think I'm up. So you may hear from me as the co-host and the host. So anyway, well, thanks for coming today, and let me turn this video off.